The topic that we are going to cover now is elicitation and facilitation tools and techniques that are used by the business analysts during the project. If I go outside, then you can see that this falls under all domains, meaning the elicitation and facilitation techniques would be used throughout the project in all the domains, which is needs assessment, planning, analysis, traceability and monitoring, and evaluation. So let's see what happens in elicitation and facilitation tools and techniques. So the learning goals we have is basically what is elicitation, what is facilitation, what do they mean. We're going to look into the business analyst skills. To elicit requirements, what are some tools and techniques used by the BA and PMs, examples of where these techniques are used, some vision development techniques and what they are, research technique, models used during facilitation process, what are focus groups, surveys and questionnaire techniques that are used for facilitation, observation and job shadowing, what that means, interviews and document analysis. So let's go to the first slide over here. Now, the most important skill a BA should have, there are two more most important ones that the BA should have. One is requirement elicitation and the other one is requirement facilitation. What does requirement elicitation means? Elicitation, the term by itself, means to draw out a response or answer to translate business needs into concrete, clear statements. So basically, during elicitation, we try to draw a response out from the customer, from the stakeholder, to translate their needs and wants, and we write it down in clear statements and give it to the team so they are able to develop it. Now, what is requirement facilitation? Now, facilitation and elicitation both work hand in hand. In facilitation, what it means is to make it easier to extract the business requirements from the customers, from the stakeholders, from the development team or vendors. Business analysts are responsible for facilitating discussion to gather, analyze, and validate the requirements for a project and gain consensus on a solution. So this is what we need to do. We need to make it easy to collect the requirements. We need to collect all the requirements from the business team, from the stakeholders, from the customers, from the vendors, and we need to gather them, analyze them, validate them, and finally gain consensus on a solution. So we will see techniques how to gain consensus on the solutions. So we have a few techniques that we could use, and we'll see that when we get to the consensus techniques. To elicit requirements, what are some tools and techniques used by BAs and PM? To elicit requirements, business analysts and project managers use facilitation techniques. Okay, that's what we are going to do now, is facilitate the requirements, make it easier to extract the requirements. And these are the facilitation techniques that makes it easy to extract requirement, like brainstorming, focus groups, JAD sessions, interview techniques, facilitated workshops, observations, document analysis, research, surveys, and questionnaires. Now, where are these techniques used? These techniques are used, for example, in the development of the project charter or even development of the project management plan. Some of the techniques that are used to do this is brainstorming, conflict resolution, problem solving, meeting management, etc. So now let's take a look at what these means. What is brainstorming? What is conflict resolution? We're going to take a look at all these terms. So first, name some of the vision development techniques. We have two techniques over here, which is brainstorming and gap analysis. So let's see what brainstorming is first. Brainstorming is an effective technique for identifying a diverse group of ideas, a new or alternate solution, or a vision within a relatively short period of time. Brainstorming works by focusing on topic or problem and helps answer questions. Now, where would you use brainstorming? For example, if we are starting with a project and we want to see what all needs to be implemented in the project to make it really good. For example, we are planning to make a green building. We got a project to make a green building that's very environmental friendly. Then how do we start with the process of collecting the requirements of what we need to have in this project? How do we get all that? So in this case, what we do is something called as brainstorming, where everyone that is involved in the project, the team members, the stakeholders, the end users, it could be anyone and everyone who is affected by the project or can affect the project, to come sit together and brainstorm and come up with different ideas to make this project green, to make this project environmental friendly. So that is where one of the places where you would use brainstorming as a technique to develop vision. Now, brainstorming works by focusing on topic or a problem and helps answer questions. Now, some of the questions would be, what are alternative options that are available to solve the problem? What factors are contributing to not moving forward with any option? What are possible causes for a delay in a product? What are possible solutions to different problems? So it will help answer all these different questions where everyone as a group sits in together and brainstorms on a lot of different questions. So in brainstorming, you are asking a lot of different questions. Now let's take a look at a picture as to what happens in brainstorming. So basically you'll see over here, there are all these team members, stakeholders sitting in together, thinking about stuff and coming up with an idea. Some of the questions that are asked during brainstorming is, why are we doing this project? What is this project about? How are we going to go about in this project? Where is this project located? When do we start working? Who are we making this project for? So these are some of the example type of questions that would be asked in a brainstorming session. Now the next development technique we have over here is called as gap analysis. Gap analysis is a technique used to develop a vision or used to generate ideas for new solution or a proposed approach. It is best to conduct gap analysis when comparing a current environment to the envisioned target environment. So basically what we have over here, we do an analysis on where we are right now to where we need to be after a certain period of time. So we see how do we analyze and how do we get to that certain point, and we analyze our problem. Now let's take a look at a picture of what I mean over here as to what gap analysis is. So in the picture, you will see over here, what we are trying to do is over time, we are trying to increase our market share. This is the present state where we fall right now, and this is the desired state where we need to reach. So what we have in the middle over here is a gap or a difference. Now we have to identify what we need to do to fill in this gap to reach to this desired state in the desired time. Some of the examples over here could be, maybe we make our product better. Maybe we try to give it a really good price, maybe reduce the price. Maybe we change the location. Or we might need to advertise more to reach up to this desired state. Or we have some promotions. We might maybe think about updating the processes or change the environment. So all these are identified during gap analysis, and then we go ahead and select the ones that we want to pick to reach the desired state. So some of the examples where gap analysis can be used is in the organization, for example, human resources, for business direction as to where we are and where we need to be, for business processes, like this is our process and we need to make this process better, and to make this process better we have to follow these steps, or even in information technology. We'll get a lot more in detail of what gap analysis is when we get to the analysis domain, where we are covering all the different analytical tools and techniques. So let's go back to where we were. So some of the vision development techniques that we saw, one was brainstorming and the other one was gap analysis. Now let's look at another facilitation technique that we have here, and it's called as the research technique. As the name says, this technique is a process of steps taken to collect and analyze data, information to increase the understanding of a topic or an issue. So if you have a question or if you have some problems, then what you usually do, you use the research technique, where you go to the library, look out for some books and try to research the problem. Nowadays it's very easy to do research because of the internet. We go on Google and then we type our keywords and then we try to research all the documents from the website. So what does the research technique consist of? It consists of 3 steps, where we pose a question, we collect data to answer the question, and present an answer to the question. Okay, so research technique for business analysts, for project managers is extremely important, and you should be able to do really good research on your own. Even your team should be encouraged in doing a lot of research during the project. The next facilitation technique we have is creating models. Now these models, depending on the industry that you're in, it could be a physical model or could be a digital model, or even could be workflow or data models. We will get a lot more in detail when we go through each and every different types of models. But let's see what models are. One additional facilitation technique for business analysts is the development of models, where they will mostly work with workflow models or data models and can provide business rules or sequencing of work that would aid in discussion. Now let's take a look at some of the models that we have. This, for example, over here is called as a use case model, where it shows the actors or the users and what their functionality is with the system. So the actor or the user would like to sign into the system, would like to sign off, would like to download the lectures, would like to register for a new class, would like to take a quiz, and would like to sign into a system. So just by this simple model or a simple diagram, you are able to say so many things that this actor would like to do, and this is the functionality that he wants with the interaction with the system. Let's see a couple more. Then we have another use case diagram where it shows how the restaurant system works. There's the waiter, there's the customer, there's the cashier, there's the chef. These are the different actors that are involved and what they should be able to do. The customer, for example, the customer would like to eat the food. So the customer would like to place the order, and the customer would like to pay for the food. The cashier in this case is going to accept the payment. The waiter is going to facilitate the payment, serve the food, receive the order, confirm the order to the chef so the chef can cook the food. So this is a use case diagram or a use case model where it shows the different users and what their functionality is and how they interact with the whole system. Then we have some data flow diagrams over here. This is the customer, and what does the customer interact with? What is the flow of the data in the whole diagram? So the customer goes into the store, scans the membership card, scans the movie barcode, processes the transaction, which is the payment record system processes the transaction, the receipt is printed, and the customer gets the rented movie and receipt. We'll be going a lot more in detail about what these different diagrams are, but I'm just showing you some of the different models. Now we have some models over here used in the architecture industry. Now I want to show the customer how the project is going to look like when it's done. So I'm going to make a digital 3D model of the project. In this case, it's probably a restaurant or a hotel or a building, commercial building that is used. So if you see, they have used a different presentation programs like 3D Studio Max and AutoCAD to make these drawings to give a realistic impression of how the building is going to look like when it's done. So basically at this time and moment, the building is not even done, but you make a realistic model of that, show it to the customer and get an approval. For any mechanical companies, you would be making the machine part. Once the machine part is made, you show it to the customer and the customer is going to give you an approval. Then we have you can make interface wires. These are wire models. They're called wires for web designing, where you're making the website, but all you make is the wireframes of these websites. And you show it to the customer page by page as to how it's going to look. and then get an approval on these pages, and that would reflect on the new website that you are creating for the customer. So there are context diagrams we have which are used in data modeling. Again, it shows over here the supplier, the customer, and how they work with the restaurant, where the customer should be able to pay the restaurant, should be able to order the food, the restaurant should be able to serve the customer meals, give the customer a receipt, a final bill. The supplier should be able to supply with the restaurant, and the restaurant should be able to order supplies from the restaurant. So these are some of the diagrams that are used during facilitation technique that we were just looking at. Let's take a look at some more facilitation techniques. They're called as facilitated workshops, group definition, or elicitation techniques. Now, these techniques are used by business analysts to collect the requirements from the key stakeholders. And we'll take the requirements and then go ahead and develop the software or build the house. For example, we'll be sitting with the customer and ask what all they need to have in their house. So the customer is going to tell you, I need a 4-bedroom house, I need a kitchen, I need 4 bathrooms, I need this detail, I need that pool, I need 2 stories. So the customer is giving you the requirements, and you will be collecting all these requirements. But this is a smaller project. Now let's take an example of building a theater for the whole city. Okay, there are not many theaters over there, so we're gonna build one huge theater. Now, the people who are going to use the theater, they are stakeholders. People who are investing money in building the theater, they are stakeholders. The people who are going to work towards the project, they are stakeholders. The city people are stakeholders. So we bring all the key stakeholders in for these facilitated workshops, and we ask them questions, as many questions as we can get answered, as to what they need for the theater, how big they want the theater to be, where they want the theater location, then for how many people they want the theater to be, what's the size of the theater, how many parkings are needed, where are we going to orient the theater to. So all these questions, you cannot do it on your own. You need all these stakeholders. So what we do in facilitated workshop, we get them together and ask them these questions. So facilitated workshops are focused sessions that bring key stakeholders together to define product requirements. Workshops are considered a primary technique for quickly defining cross-functional requirements and reconciling stakeholder differences. Because of their interactive group nature, well-facilitated sessions can build trust, foster relationships, and improve communication among participants, which in turn will lead to increased stakeholder consensus. In addition to this, if there are any issues, they can be discovered earlier and resolved more quickly than if it was an individual sessions. So instead of having a meeting individually with 10 different stakeholders, basically you bring in all 10 stakeholders together, and then we have a meeting where we are collecting all these different requirements. For example, facilitated workshop called as joint application design or development, in short, JAD sessions. This is a very commonly technique used in software development to gather the requirements. So over here, again, you invite all the stakeholders together and you are trying to gather information for the software that needs to be developed. So these Joint application design sessions can go for days. They happen a lot during the beginning of the project, obviously, because we need to collect all the requirements. And once the JAT sessions are done, we should have all the requirements that are needed for this project. Depending on the size of the project, the JAT session or the joint application development session will last that long. But this is one of the first things that happens after the project is approved, is we need to get the requirements. And as business analysts, that is one of the most important jobs that we do, is to gather all the requirements and to gather them correctly and to communicate all these requirements to our team so they are able to develop the software correctly. These facilitated sessions focus on bringing business subject matter experts and the development team together to improve the software development process. So you will have stakeholders, you will have subject matter experts, and you will have the team together to improve the software development process. JAT sessions are useful to elicit large amounts of information within a relative short time frame. They can be used to generate ideas for new system features, review and agree to specifications of a system, or gain consensus on the objective of the project. It helps with more natural interaction between people than a formal interview. So JAT sessions are extremely important whenever it comes to big projects or whenever it comes to software development projects. In the manufacturing industry, quality function deployment is another example of facilitated workshop technique. Now, what the quality functional deployment does is it helps determine critical characteristics for a new product development. Quality functional deployment starts by collecting customer needs, also known as voice of the customer. User stories, use cases, which are short textual descriptions of required functionality, are often developed during these workshops. Now, we did see a use case diagram before. I'll go back to that. Now, this is a use case diagram that we were just going through. So once we collect the requirements, then we can really make this quick diagram as to this is the actor and these are the things that the actor needs to do. And where did we get these requirements from? We got it in our meeting from the stakeholders. So stakeholders said, okay, I want the user or the actor to be able to sign into the system, to be able to take a quiz, to be able to download lectures and stuff like that. So you'll make a really quick use case diagram showing this is what the actors should be able to do. And these diagrams, they go on to the developer so that it's really easy to understand, so they know what exactly they are working with. Now, when we go into process analysis tools and techniques, we'll go a lot more into detail as what's the use case, how to draw a use case, what is the use case diagram, what are precondition, post conditions, and all that stuff. Now, some more facilitation techniques. What we have over here next is focus groups. Focus groups may be used to gather input into design or feedback from individuals who are directly involved with a process. Example, customers, stakeholders, subject matter experts, end users. Focus groups are a good technique to learn about opportunities for improvement and customer needs and problems. A focus group can be utilized during any life cycle state exploratory, under development, ready to launch, or in production, which may result in updating existing requirements or uncovering new requirements. The process includes, these are the steps for focus groups. First, you prepare for the focus group, where you recruit the participants, assign a moderator and a recorder who's going to record the meeting, and create a discussion guide as to what we are going to discuss in this focus group today, and reserve the site and services as to where we are going to have this meeting. Run the focus group session. That's the next step. And the final third step is to produce the report that we were over there for to solve in the first place. Now, this can happen during any of your development phases. So the next technique we have is surveys and questionnaires. Then we are left with observation, jobs, shadowing, document analysis, and interviews. So let's see what happens during the facilitation technique, where we're conducting surveys and questionnaire technique. Surveys and questionnaires, they are informal means to elicit requirement. Participants over here, you have to remember, in surveys and questionnaires, they are anonymous. So you don't know who is answering the particular questions. Surveys are used to reach large audiences. So I don't want to interview each and every single person if there are like 200 of them. So I'll give it a survey. In this case, I'm reaching a larger audience in a relatively short time. Surveys can be designed to characterize requirements or envision components of a system. Surveys, some things to remember about surveys is surveys are short to ensure a high response rate. Survey questions can be closed, where the respondent is asked to select from only available responses, or it could be open-ended, where the respondent is free to answer the questions as they wish. So with these surveys and questionnaires, what we can get is we can collect the attitudes, beliefs, characteristics. We can quickly collect info from large number of people in a relatively short time, and surveys can even be administered remotely. So you don't need to call everyone in a meeting room to take the survey. You can send the survey by email as well. Okay, so the next technique we have over here is observation or job shadowing. Now, when we are in a requirement collection process as business analysts, there's one of the things that we could do is we could stand and observe the user doing their work, and accordingly we are going to write the requirements. Accordingly, we are going to create the use case stories or the use case diagrams, because over here, rather than listening to the user as to what they want, you try to observe and see what they do and how you can make it better. So this is where the observer spends time with the subjects or the users who he's developing the software. Observing a user is an effective technique when gathering requirements pertaining to an existing, current process. It provides the business analyst insight on overall process as well as any bottlenecks that might happen in the future. Now you have to understand that the observing and job shadowing can be done if there is an existing or a current process. Okay, you cannot do job shadowing if that something like that never existed or it doesn't exist. So observation shadowing allow the business analyst to uncover requirements that may have been easily overlooked. And as a business analyst, you know how important is to get the correct requirements, how important it is not to miss any important requirements. So for that, you're doing all these different techniques to make sure you are getting the best requirements there are and in the best possible manner. And for that, you're using all these different techniques basically to collect these requirements. The technique is effective for analysis of workflow process modeling or business process re-engineering. One disadvantage is extremely time consuming. So when you're doing observation and job shadowing, obviously you are watching the user doing the whole work and you're making down notes as to what they do and how they do it and how you could make it better. But it is extremely time consuming. Now let's take a look at interviews. This, as the name says, to collect the requirements, you are going to interview the stakeholders. Interviewing stakeholders either is an individual or group setting. It is a straightforward approach to obtaining requirements. Interviewing stakeholders or end users allows the business analyst to ask open-ended questions and probing questions to uncover the necessary requirement and understand the expectations. So for a business analyst, it is important not just to write down these requirements, but even understand these needs and wants from the customers. You should understand what their expectations are. So that is why it is so important, and a business analyst has to stress a lot on these techniques. At the end of the interview, the business analyst should send their notes to the interviewee for a review. Two types of interviews are structured and open-ended. In structured, agenda are fairly open questions, or open-ended, there's no present agenda. Okay, so that's the only two. One is the structured, where you have all the questions and the whole interview structured, or the other one is open-ended, where there's no agenda and it's just you have questions and answers back and forth. Okay, so the last technique that we are going to go in facilitation techniques is the document analysis. And as the name says over here, we are going to look at all the documents that exist, and we are going to analyze these documents and use these documents towards creating our requirements. We are going to see if everything is correct in the documents or something is wrong in the documents, and we are going to use that technique for our requirements analysis. The document analysis technique is one of the most effective ways of kickstarting the requirement elicitation phase. It is the art of studying relevant businesses, systems, and project documentation with the objective of understanding the business, the project background, and identifying requirements or opportunities for improvement. So before you get into getting all the requirements, and before you get into the surveys, and before you get into the JAD sessions or QFD sessions, you will try to get into document analysis of all the documents that already exist from any relevant businesses or relevant projects that have been done before, or it could be the documents from the organizations from previous projects. So you're going to take a look at these documents and analyze these documents so you understand the project better and see what are the requirements. Try to identify some of the requirements, or opportunities for improvement if there are any. It is gathering information before scheduling interviews or other elicitation sessions with stakeholders. It is performed in different stages. First one is the prepare stage, which involves identifying which materials are suitable and relevant for analysis. So in this stage, you are going to look at which materials are we going to use to analyze. Which documents are we going to use to analyze? So we identify those first. The next one is the review stage. Now in this stage, this is where you're studying and reading and going through all these documents, taking down notes and information, and listing follow-up questions for the stakeholders. And the last one is the wrap-up stage, where this stage involves reviewing all the notes with stakeholders, organizing requirements, and seeking answers to follow-up questions. So this covers all the elicitation and facilitation technique and what they mean for your exam. This is used in the PMP exam. It is used in the business analyst PMI-PBA exam. So as a business analyst, as a project manager, it is a must to know all these facilitation and elicitation techniques that are used not just in the requirement phase, but pretty much throughout the project. Okay, so the next one that we are going to cover is decision-making tools and techniques. Now what happens over here is we are getting all these requirements and we are having all these different sessions with the different stakeholders. But what happens if these stakeholders don't come to a decision or agree on one thing? That's when we are going to use the decision-making tools and techniques to get to a certain decision. So until next time, see you again. Thanks for watching.